For 2 centuries, the name Terran Federation was synonymous with peace in the Orion Arm. Humanity had burst onto the galactic stage not with the thunder of warships, but with the quiet hum of construction drones and the earnest dialogue of diplomats. In a galaxy rife with ancient rivalries, simmering border disputes, and the cold calculus of resource-driven empires, humanity was a baffling, almost naive anomaly. They were the builders, the mediators, the weavers of intricate treaties where others saw only intractable conflicts. Their ships were a common sight in disputed territories, not bristling with weapons, but laden with humanitarian aid, mobile negotiation suites, and teams of relentlessly optimistic cultural envoys. The Terran diplomatic corps was legendary. They had successfully mediated the Cathar-Salaxian border war, a conflict that had simmered for 1,000 years, by painstakingly translating ancient poetry to find a shared cultural ancestor. They had averted a catastrophic trade war between the resource-hoarding Zorg and the manufacturing guilds of Cygnus by creating a complex, mutually beneficial economic model that no one had thought to propose. The galaxy's elder races, like the stoic, crystalline Tholians and the mathematically obsessed Vex, viewed humanity with a kind of detached curiosity. They saw Terrans as a useful, if overly emotional, tool for maintaining galactic stability. Their rapid expansion and colonization were seen not as a threat, but as the work of industrious, well-meaning children building their sandcastles in a vast cosmic ocean. Humanity's military, the Terran Defense Force, was seen as a reflection of this peaceful doctrine. It was a well-equipped but demonstrably defensive fleet. Their ships were heavily armored, their point defense systems second to none, but they were notably lacking in the kind of overwhelming offensive firepower favored by the more aggressive empires. They trained for blockade-running planetary defense and anti-piracy operations. They had never fought a major interstellar war. To the great powers of the galaxy, the TDF was a competent coast guard, not a true navy. This perception was not an accident. It was a carefully cultivated aspect of Terran foreign policy. Kindness, they believed, was not a weakness, but the very foundation of a stable and prosperous existence. Ambassador Aris Thorn, a man whose family had served in the diplomatic corps for generations, embodied this philosophy. His face was a map of gentle lines, his voice calm and reasonable, and his patience seemingly infinite. He was currently stationed on the neutral hub of Citadel, attempting to mediate a fresh dispute between the lumbering, reptilian Grok and their smaller, more agile neighbors, the Silithi. "Honored Grok hegemon," Aris said, his voice a soothing balm in the tense negotiation chamber. "We understand your concern over the Silithi's asteroid mining operations. However, the Silithi representative has presented compelling evidence that their activities are well within the mineral rights established by the Treaty of the Twin Suns." The Grok hegemon, a creature the size of a small shuttlecraft, let out a low rumble, a sound of deep-seated displeasure. "The Silithi are pests. They nibble at our borders, their ships a constant annoyance." "And we understand your frustration," Aris conceded with a gentle nod. Perhaps a new, jointly operated sensor network could be established, funded by the Federation, to provide transparency and ensure both parties are adhering to the established boundaries. It would provide security for you and protect the Silithi from unfounded accusations. It was a classic Terran solution: diffuse, de-escalate, and then build something together. It was a strategy that had worked time and time again. But on the far side of the galaxy, a different kind of power was watching humanity's gentle diplomacy, and they did not see strength. They saw a target. The Val'karr Ascendancy was a predator, an empire forged in the crucible of conquest. Their entire culture was built upon a philosophy of galactic manifest destiny. They believed the strong had the right, even the duty, to rule the weak. Their fleets were not gilded works of art like the Vathars of old. They were brutal, efficient engines of destruction, all sharp angles and dark, radar-absorbent armor. Their warriors were bred for conquest, their society a rigid pyramid with the strongest and most ruthless at its apex. The Val'karr had watched humanity's rise with a mixture of contempt and avarice. They saw the Terran Federation's vast, resource-rich colonies, their thriving trade networks, and their stubbornly peaceful nature. To the Val'karr High Command, led by the iron-fisted Grand Marshal Cathar, humanity was not a respected peer. It was a ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. "They are a species of merchants and talkers," Cathar growled, his 4 eyes narrowing as he observed holographic displays of Terran shipping lanes. "They build bridges, not warships. They offer treaties where a true power would offer an ultimatum." His strategists agreed. The Terran Defense Force was a joke, a fleet designed to police, not to conquer. Their ships lacked the necessary spinal-mounted weaponry for a true offensive. Their doctrine was one of reaction, not action. The Val'karr began their campaign of aggression subtly, testing the waters. They started by raiding merchant convoys in the lawless outer sectors, using unmarked pirate vessels. The Terran Federation responded with diplomatic protests, increased patrols, and offers to fund a joint anti-piracy task force. The Val'karr saw this as a sign of weakness, not a gesture of peace. Their aggressions escalated. They began to encroach upon the borders of worlds allied with the Federation, conducting military exercises that were thinly veiled displays of intimidation. Humanity responded with strongly worded demarches, calls for concordant mediation, and a renewed push for a galaxy-wide non-aggression pact. Cathar and his council laughed at the Terrans' endless capacity for talk. "They are like a herd of fat, bleating groks," Cathar declared. "They make a great deal of noise, but they have no teeth." The final test, the one that would confirm humanity's cowardice in the eyes of the Val'karr, was the annexation of a small, independent system on the Federation's border, a system with which humanity had a long-standing trade and friendship treaty. The Val'karr fleet warped in, overwhelming the local defenses in a matter of hours, and declared the system under Ascendancy protection. The galaxy held its breath, expecting a military response from the Federation. Instead, humanity condemned the action in the strongest possible terms. They imposed economic sanctions. They recalled their ambassador. They pushed for a full vote of censure in the Galactic Concordat. They did everything except fight. For Cathar, this was the final confirmation. The Terrans were spineless. Their rich colonies were his for the taking. He selected his target, a jewel in the crown of the Terran Federation, a world that was a symbol of their philosophy, of peace and prosperity, a world called Elysian Fields. Elysian Fields was humanity's testament to its own ideals. It was a garden world in the truest sense. Its continents a patchwork of lush forests, golden plains, and sparkling blue rivers. Its cities were not sprawling metropolises, but carefully planned arcologies that blended seamlessly with the natural landscape. It was a world dedicated to art, science, and the peaceful cultivation of life. It had no significant military installations, its planetary defense grid designed to handle stray asteroids and the occasional pirate raid, nothing more. Its population of 2 billion souls consisted of farmers, artists, scientists, and their families. It was the heart of the Terran dream. Lena Petrova, a xenobotanist, was one of those souls. Her life was a quiet rhythm of studying the unique flora of Elysian Fields, tending to her gardens, and raising her young son, Mika. Her husband, Jorik, was a captain in the TDF, currently stationed on a patrol cruiser near the border. His messages were filled with a growing unease about the Val'karr, but life on Elysian Fields felt a million miles away from the troubles of the galaxy. The day the sky broke began like any other. The twin suns of the Elysian system cast a warm, golden light across the plains. Mika was playing in the garden, chasing the iridescent butter moths that flitted among the flowers. Lena was cataloging a new species of singing orchid, its petals vibrating with a soft melodic hum. Then, the sky tore open. Jagged black rents in reality appeared, the telltale sign of a Val'karr forced space entry. From these wounds bled the Val'karr fleet. Dozens of their brutal angular warships filled the sky, blotting out the suns. They were not here to negotiate. They were not here to intimidate. The planetary defense grid, a network of orbiting satellites and ground-based emplacements activated automatically. It was a valiant but utterly futile effort. The Val'karr fleet brushed aside the defenses with a contemptuous ease, their powerful plasma cannons incinerating the satellites, their kinetic bombardment turning the ground emplacements into craters of molten rock. Then they began to bombard the cities. It was not a strategic bombardment. It was not aimed at disabling infrastructure or neutralizing military targets. It was an act of pure, unadulterated terror. Beams of raw energy lanced down from the heavens, turning the beautiful, harmonious arcologies into raging infernos. They targeted parks, universities, museums. They turned the golden plains to glass. Lena grabbed Mika, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, and ran for the public emergency shelter. All around them, the world was ending. The air was filled with the screams of the dying, the roar of collapsing buildings, and the deafening, soul-shaking thunder of the orbital bombardment. She made it to the shelter, a crowded, terrified space filled with the faces of her neighbors, her friends. They huddled together in the darkness, listening to the muffled sounds of their world being torn apart. The bombardment lasted for 3 hours. Then, an eerie silence fell. After a while, the shelter's massive doors hissed open, revealing a sky choked with black smoke and the acrid smell of death. Then came the ground troops. The Val'karr warriors were nightmares of black armor and glowing red optics. They moved with a brutal, efficient purpose, their weapons firing indiscriminately. There was no resistance. There were no soldiers to fight. There was only a population of terrified civilians. The Val'karr began the pacification. They rounded up survivors, their methods brutal. Those who resisted were executed on the spot. Those who complied were herded into makeshift containment camps. It was not a conquest. It was an extermination, a public galaxy-wide display of what happened to those who defied the Val'karr Ascendancy. The entire atrocity was broadcast on all channels, a deliberate act of psychological warfare. The Val'karr wanted the galaxy to watch. They wanted to show everyone, especially the Terran Federation, the price of weakness. On the bridge of the TDFS Stalwart, Captain Jorix Petrova watched the broadcast from Elysian Fields, his face pale, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. He saw his home burning. He saw his people being slaughtered. He tried to contact his wife, his son, but all communications were jammed. He was under strict orders. The TDF was to maintain a defensive posture, to await instructions from high command. His ship, a lone cruiser, was no match for the Val'karr fleet. To attack would be suicide. But as he watched a Val'karr warrior strike down a group of fleeing civilians, something inside him broke. Logic, orders, protocol, they all vanished, replaced by a cold primal rage. "Helm," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "Set a course for Elysian Fields. Maximum burn." "Captain," his first officer protested, his face a mask of shock. "Our orders." "Damn the orders," Jorix snarled, his eyes never leaving the horrifying images on the screen. "Those are our people. That is our home." Across the Terran Federation, that same cold rage was igniting in the hearts of billions. The broadcast, intended to terrorize, had done something else entirely. It had united humanity in a way that 2 centuries of peace never could. It had flipped a switch, awakening something dormant, something ancient and terrible. In the gleaming halls of the Federation's Senate on Earth, the debate was brief and unanimous. The usual factions, the endless arguments, the political maneuvering, all of it was gone. There was only a single, unified, ice-cold resolve. Ambassador Eris Thorn, recalled from his post on Citadel, stood before the assembly. The gentle lines on his face were gone, replaced by a hard, granite-like stillness. His voice, once a soothing balm, was now the flat, sharp crack of a whip. The Val'karr Ascendancy has, by their own hand, designated themselves as an existential threat to the Terran Federation and all sentient life that values peace and liberty. They have crossed a line from which there is no return. Therefore, this body, with the full and unified consent of the people of the Federation, does hereby declare a state of total war. He paused, his eyes sweeping across the silent, resolute faces of the senators. Our war aim is not conquest. It is not subjugation. It is the complete and unconditional dismantlement of the Val'karr Ascendancy, the removal of their capacity to wage war, and the prosecution of their leadership for crimes against sentience. There will be no negotiation. There will be no quarter. There will be no peace until the threat of the Val'karr is permanently and irrevocably erased from this galaxy. The vote was a formality. A single unified "I" echoed through the chamber. Across human space, the pivot was instantaneous and total. The shift was so fast, so complete that it sent a shockwave through the galactic economy. Factories that had been producing luxury goods and consumer electronics were, within hours, being retooled to produce ammunition and warship components. Civilian transport ships were being retrofitted into troop carriers. University research departments dropped their theoretical studies and were now focused on military applications. The Terran Defense Force, the gentle Coast Guard, transformed. From hidden shipyards in deep space, from fortified moon bases, from orbital platforms that had been disguised as research stations, emerged a new fleet. These were not the defensive cruisers the galaxy knew. These were ships of the line, bristling, with spinal-mounted mass drivers, heavy plasma cannons, and weapon systems the Concordat hadn't even known humanity possessed. Dormant military protocols, hidden deep within the Federation's charter, were activated. A state of total mobilization, a relic of Earth's brutal pre-integration history, was declared. The galaxy, which had been watching the tragedy of Elysian Fields with a mixture of pity and a sense of grim inevitability, was now watching the Terran Federation with a new, dawning horror. The gentle pacifist herd of Groks had, in the blink of an eye, become a pack of slavering wolves. The weavers of peace had become the harbingers of a war so total, so absolute, that it defied the civilized norms of the galaxy. The red line had been crossed, and the universe was about to find out what that meant. The first Terran counterattack was not a strategic move. It was an act of pure, unadulterated vengeance. The TDFS stalwart, Captain Jorik Petrova's lone cruiser, arrived at Elysian Fields ahead of the main fleet. He did not engage the Val'karr armada in orbit. He plunged his ship into the atmosphere, a suicidal maneuver, using his shields to weather the fiery descent. He flew his ship not to a military target, but to the largest of the Val'karr's civilian containment camps, the one where he had last seen images of his wife and son. He broadcast on all channels, his voice a raw, broken snarl. "For Elysian Fields!" Then he overloaded his ship's reactor. The resulting explosion vaporized the containment camp, the Val'karr garrison stationed there, and a significant portion of the surrounding area. It was a brutal, horrifying act, the sacrifice of a single ship and its crew to deliver a message. It was the first, terrible note in humanity's symphony of wrath. Then, the main fleet arrived. The Terran fleet that emerged from hyperspace over Elysian Fields was not the defensive force the Val'karr had studied. It was a fleet built for one purpose: annihilation. Their tactics were not the elegant formations of the elder races. They were a brutal, efficient swarm. Drones, mass drivers, and overwhelming missile barrages tore into the surprised Val'karr fleet. The Val'karr, caught off guard by the sheer ferocity and unexpected power of the human response, were thrown into chaos. Their ships, designed for conquest against less advanced foes, were systematically dismantled. The battle for Elysian Fields was not a battle. It was an execution. But humanity's war was not just being fought in space. It was being fought on every front, with every tool at their disposal. Our economic warfare was devastating. Terran corporations, with their vast networks and their aggressive, almost predatory business practices, systematically dismantled the Val'karr's economic infrastructure. They crashed their currency, bought out their essential industries, through shell corporations, and then liquidated them. They turned the Val'karr's own logistical networks against them, bribing, coercing, and manipulating their way into a position of total economic dominance. Our information warfare was even more brutal. We didn't just broadcast propaganda. We weaponized the Val'karr's own hierarchical, honor-based culture against them. We leaked falsified, but utterly believable, evidence of betrayal and cowardice among their high command. We broadcast doctored videos of their revered leaders engaging in acts of grotesque dishonor. We turned their own psychological weapons against them, sowing seeds of paranoia and distrust that ripped through their rigid social structure. And then, there was the ground war. As the Terran fleets pushed into Val'karr territory, our ground forces, the Terran Marine Corps, were unleashed. These were not peacekeepers. They were the inheritors of centuries of brutal terrestrial warfare. They were masters of attrition, of urban combat, of psychological operations. They moved with a speed and ferocity that terrified the Val'karr. They did not seek to conquer, they sought to break the enemy's will to fight. On the first Val'karr colony world they invaded, they did not engage in a conventional assault. They systematically dismantled the planet's infrastructure, plunging it into chaos. They turned the subjugated populations against their Val'karr masters, arming them, training them, and fueling the fires of rebellion. They turned the Val'karr's own empire against them, an act of strategic jujitsu that the Val'karr, with their linear force-on-force doctrine, could not comprehend. Grand Marshal Cathar watched his empire crumble. The humans were not fighting a war as he understood it. They were not seeking a glorious victory. They were systematically, dispassionately, and with a terrifying efficiency, erasing his civilization from existence. The gentle, talkative species had become a force of nature, a cleansing fire of righteous fury. The final battle of the war took place not in space, but on the Val'karr homeworld itself. The Terran fleet had blockaded the system, their victory all but assured. But humanity was not content with a simple surrender. They wanted to make a point. A single human, Ambassador Aris Thorn, descended to the planet's surface. He was not there to negotiate. He was there to deliver the terms. He stood in the grand chamber of the Val'karr High Command, the same chamber where Cathar had once mocked humanity's weakness. He was surrounded by the remnants of the Val'karr leadership, their faces a mixture of fear, hatred, and bewildered disbelief. Aris Thorn's face was no longer gentle. It was a mask of cold, hard justice. His voice held no room for negotiation. "The Val'karr Ascendancy is hereby dissolved," he stated, his words echoing in the vast chamber. "Your military is to be permanently dismantled. Your fleet is to be scuttled. Your leadership will stand trial before a galactic tribunal for the crimes committed at Elysian Fields." He paused, his eyes locking with Cathar's. "Your world will be placed under Federation administration. Your people re-educated, your culture revised. You will be taught the value of peace, of cooperation, of the sanctity of sentient life. You will learn, through generations of introspection, the true meaning of the red line you so arrogantly crossed. Cathar, his empire in ruins, his spirit broken, could only stare in stunned silence. He had expected a final, glorious battle. He had expected to die a warrior's death. Instead, he was being lectured. He was being treated not as a conquered foe, but as a failed student, a child in need of a harsh but necessary lesson. The war was over. The Val'karr Ascendancy was no more. Humanity had won, not just a military victory, but a total, crushing, ideological one. The galaxy looked upon the Terran Federation with a new, profound, and deeply unsettling respect. The Weavers of Peace had shown them a capacity for violence that was as terrifying as it was effective. The gentle diplomats had proven to be the most ruthless warriors the galaxy had ever seen. Humanity slowly, deliberately, pivoted back to peace. Our fleets returned to their defensive posture. Our industries resumed their civilian production. Our diplomats once again began to weave their intricate tapestries of treaties and trade agreements. But there was a new edge to their diplomacy, a new, unspoken weight behind their words. When a human ambassador now spoke of peace, of cooperation, of the importance of respecting boundaries, the galaxy listened. They listened because they had seen what happened when those boundaries were crossed. They had seen the righteous fury of a species that had drawn a red line in the stardust. On the now rebuilding world of Elysian Fields, a massive monument was erected. It was not a statue of a conquering hero or a triumphant fleet. It was a simple, stark pillar of black obsidian, upon which were inscribed the names of every man, woman, and child who had died in the initial attack. It was a scar, a permanent reminder of the price of peace and the terrible cost of crossing the red line. Eris Thorn often visited the monument, his face once again etched with the gentle lines of a peacemaker, but his eyes holding a new, deeper wisdom, a profound sorrow. He would stand before the pillar, a silent testament to the dual nature of his species, the boundless capacity for creation and the terrifying absolute capacity for destruction. Humanity had shown the galaxy its heart, a heart that yearned for peace, for connection, for a universe of shared prosperity. But they had also shown them their spine, a spine forged in the fires of their own brutal history, a spine of unyielding, unbreakable resolve. And the galaxy, for better or for worse, would never again mistake the kindness of humanity for weakness. The lesson had been taught, the red line had been drawn, and the silence of the vanquished was a testament to its terrible, enduring power.